Hey everyone, thank you for taking the time today to learn about Comdata's vendor enrollment. So you have or just are about to kick off your vendor enrollment campaign in the upcoming weeks. So I want to start with what you can expect, what your role will be in the process, and we will also go over some best practices for a successful campaign. The first thing I would like to prepare you for is the phone calls that you will receive once your campaign begins. Be prepared for that and don't panic. Do understand that this is a change for your vendors and change can be scary. These calls do usually subside within a month or two, and especially after your first payments go out to the vendors on the program. We do make every effort to explain the program to your vendors, and we only enroll vendors who agree to accept payment from you this way. We also send them a welcome email that explains the program, but unfortunately you still will get some calls from time to time with questions with vendors that may change their minds. Here are a few examples of the calls you can expect to get. The first and most common is that the vendor lost the first 6 digits of the card or may not have received the welcome email. Your first payment may have come well after the welcome email was received, or potentially it was blocked or went to their spam folder. But that's no problem. We will provide you with a copy of the welcome email as well as the first 6 digits of the card, so you can provide those to any vendor that may not have them. Another call you may get is just a supplier wanting to confirm that our call is not fraudulent. Obviously, there's a lot of fraud in this day and age, and your vendor may just want to confirm that our call is legitimate and that you are in fact changing your payment methods and that Comdata is reaching out on your behalf. You may get calls from some folks that don't understand the program. The vendor may have a larger accounts receivable department, or the person that we initially enrolled is not the person that's currently processing the payments. We can certainly help in those situations, explain the program. You may also get calls from some folks that are concerned that their fees are too high, or confirming whether they have to take credit card as a form of payment. The vendor may not have realized when they told us that they would accept for you that their payments would be so large. We don't ever pressure a vendor into accepting credit card or tell them that it's required. Our call is only to discuss the credit card option or potentially Comdata Direct. You also may get folks that say that they didn't sign up for the program, and that can kind of include any of the above reasons. We don't state to the vendor that we're signing them up for a program or enrolling them in a program. When we do speak with them, we confirm that they do accept payment via MasterCard and that they will accept your payments that way on your behalf going forward. And the vendor agreeing to that is them enrolling in the program. So if you use that verbiage, a vendor may say they didn't sign up, but we do not do that in writing. We have documents that you can use to help you answer some of these questions along the way too. Next, we want to touch on some things that you can do to help make the program successful. Obviously, you are in more frequent contact with your vendors than we are, and so you've got the ability to present a positive image of the program and what the benefits of it are. So your interactions with your vendors will help complement the formal vendor enrollment activities taking place here at Comdata. Because of that, you'll want to be sure that you have a clear understanding of the virtual payments program so that you're able to communicate effectively with your suppliers about it. One thing you should definitely do is designate a proactive administrator and an internal ambassador to clarify the process to your clients and colleagues, someone that can kind of answer questions about the program in general. We've got an example here on the screen of a customer that was asked via email about Comdata and whether we were authorized to contact vendors on their behalf. This customer does follow our best practice, and they validate Comdata's involvement and do reinforce the fact that payment via credit card is their preferred method of payment. They even take it a step further and request that the vendor help them achieve their goals in this initiative. So this is a great example here of a way to answer questions or validation emails that you may get from a vendor. And touching back on the strategic calls that we place to your vendors, here are the talking points that we address on every call. So like I said, we give them a call and let them know that we are calling on your behalf. We ask if they are able to accept MasterCard for payment for your invoices. If they do, we will ask if there are any additional fees, limitations, loss of discount, or changes to the account for paying that way. Assuming all those things are a no, we will ask if we're able to email the remittance information. If so, we will obtain the best email address. And if they say no to any of these questions, we'll try to find out why, and we might utilize Comdata Direct or Merchant Processor, and both of those are options that we'll discuss a little more further along in this presentation. After we have started your campaign and your vendor list has been loaded in, we'll begin placing calls to your vendors, and after those calls start, we will begin sending you weekly updates. And those updates will come to you via email, and they'll show you the progress of your campaign and which vendors, most importantly, have enrolled in the program so that you can turn them on in your accounting software and start paying them through Comdata. So your weekly report will contain 3 tabs, and we've got a few snapshots of each of those tabs here on the screen. The first tab is the Vendor Updates tab, and that's going to show the weekly enrollment or decline activity, basically all activity for the prior 7 days. It'll also include vendors that we need more information for in order for us to continue with enrollment efforts. We'll dig a little deeper into this first tab. So you'll see the status column, that's column F, and the first thing you want to look for is vendors that are marked enrolled. And you'll want to make sure that any vendors that have a status reason of enrolled are flagged in your system to receive Comdata payments. And obviously you'll see in column A there that column is action required. And for enrolled vendors, that action is going to be turn this vendor on in your ERP. One thing to note about turning vendors on for Comdata payments, Comdata does house the email addresses for the payments. So if your system does require an email address, you'll want to use do-not-send@comdata.com. And that's going to act as a placeholder when you send us a payment file, because otherwise any email address that you send in will override the email address we've got in the system. And we don't want that to happen because there may be email address changes and things to that effect. So it is best if you do require an email just to use the do-not-send@comdata.com. Next, if you see a vendor with a status of requires more info, pay for you opportunity, or phone number needed in that status reason column, you want to look over one more column to the notes section. That's column G, and there will be a note in that column letting you know exactly what it is we need to proceed with enrollment efforts. It may be obviously that we do need a phone number. It may be that we need an account number or a copy of an invoice for some additional relevant information about your account so that we're able to reference that to the vendor. Any that you see like that, you'll want to, you can fill that information in on the spreadsheet and return it. You can put it in the body of an email and return it. Invoice copies, we do ask that you save the file with the name being the vendor number so that we are able to properly marry up the invoice copy that you send in to the appropriate vendor relationship. If you send that information into the email address that you see here in column A for those that we're talking about, Vendor Enrollment at comdata.com, they'll take that information, they'll update it in our portal, and our call team will be able to resume efforts trying to enroll the vendor. And the next thing you'll see is in status reason is declined. If a vendor declines for whatever reason, you'll see 2 columns over, there is a column labeled reason for decline. That's column H, and we'll let you know the reason that the vendor didn't accept. It may be that they don't process credit cards. It may be that they pass on a processing fee. Whatever the case is, we'll let you know there why the vendor was declined. Another thing that you might see is pending status. That's the last one that you'll see in that first snippet. And if they are pending, that means that we've reached out to the vendor but have not been able to find out their acceptance policy. It may be that we've left a voicemail. that we left a message or that we were not able to get through when we called them. We will continue to call vendors up to 4 to 5 times and try to find out what their policy is. So when you see vendors in the pending status, that is no action required on your end, and we will continue to work on those. The next screenshot you'll see is the Lost Opportunities tab, and that tab will show you all the vendors that we have enrolled but have yet to receive a payment through Comdata. So you'll want to review that tab just to make sure that everyone that you see there is in fact turned on in your accounting software to receive payments through Comdata. It may be that you just haven't had an invoice come through for that vendor, but we do just want to make sure to maximize your spend and rebate that you do have everyone turned on properly. Lastly, you'll see the Instructions tab. That's going to be the third tab, and it's the simplest one, and it basically will give you a rundown, just like I described, of how to read the report. The last thing you'll see here at the bottom is a vendor master report. So if you ever do miss a week of your weekly reporting, or let's say you get behind on updating your vendors, or you went on vacation, whatever the case is there's no need to worry. If you email that same email address that you see above, vendorenrollment@comdata.com, and just ask them for a vendor master list. They'll send that over to you, and that report will show you the status of all your vendors for the life of the campaign. So that's something that you can also do in the middle and end of your campaign, just to do an audit to make sure that you do have all the appropriate vendors enrolled or declined or whatever status they may be in. And along those lines, we will also have, after your campaign kicks off, a mid and end of campaign review. And we'll discuss the progress of the campaign and go over any missing information, any vendor questions and things like that, and let you know exactly how the campaign is going. Now, we will get into the options that we offer on the calls when we do reach out to your vendors. So here are a few of the different strategies, and this will help us target 100% of your vendor list, which is a huge benefit of Comdata. We will reach out to all of your vendors in some capacity. So the first thing that we'll do is run a prospect match on your vendors. So we're going to show you which vendors already accept virtual payments through the Comdata match process. Your vendors will automatically be matched with one of the 750,000 vendors that we currently have enrolled in our network. We'll then send those vendors a welcome email and let them know that you're changing your payment method and would like to pay them with a virtual card as our other clients are. This will confirm their acceptance and allow you to have vendors enrolled in the program and ready to pay right away. We do have a team of 24 in-house vendor enrollment associates like myself that are aligned with your program goals. So we've got an operations team, and those are the folks at the vendor enrollment at comdata.com box. They handle the data. They'll manage mailings to your vendors that are below $25,000 in annual spend. And then we've also got a strategic call team, and we will place strategic calls to your vendors that are above $25,000 in annual spend. Once we start doing that, that's when you're going to get the weekly reports that we just touched on, and those will let you know where you are on your campaign, and it'll show you which vendors have enrolled in the program. We do utilize multiple options to maximize enrollment and spend realization during the campaign. So the first offer is virtual card, and that's where your vendors are paid with a single-use MasterCard via email. And this is offered on every call and is the most widely accepted. Next, we've got our complimentary pay-for-you service. This allows us to increase your spend by submitting payments on your behalf to vendors who will only accept card, online, or over the phone. So if we contact the vendor and they do accept and do not take card information via email for whatever reason, we'll ask if we're able to submit those payments by phone or through a web portal, and if we can do that, then we will enroll the vendor that way. Next, we've got Comdata Direct, and this is a proprietary network that allows your vendors to receive payments directly into their bank account without having to process a credit card. We also partner with a merchant processor, and that company is Infintech. And if your vendors don't accept card and have interest in it, or if they think their fees are too high and would like to explore other options, then we will refer them over to Infintech. Another thing we do is partner with MasterCard to help educate vendors on the rules of acceptance, as well as validate the acceptance policies of some vendors. And one more thing that we will do is provide ongoing campaigning for your newly added vendors. We do love new vendors, so as you get those, we would love it if you would send them in to us. Another feature that we've got is reminder emails. So we will send reminders to your vendors about cards if they haven't processed those at 3, 7, and 12 days. And at the 15th day, we've got a team that will also place phone calls to your vendors to check to see why they haven't processed the card and try to help them get that processed and see what the issues are. These email settings of the 3, 7, and 12 days are defaults. However, you can set those to whatever days you would like. That is whatever your preference is. So the first option that we discussed was the virtual card option, and that does provide a number of benefits to your vendors, and I've got some of those here on the screen. First is that they will be guaranteed payment through the MasterCard network. Once those funds are issued, they are guaranteed that payment through MasterCard. Another is prompt settlement to help minimize payment delays, collections costs, and disputes. The vendor will get detailed payment information on the remittance, including a list of invoice numbers, dates, and amounts that are being paid. The remittance will also contain a CTX 820 flat file attachment, and they can use that to automatically close out invoices in their accounting software. If anyone needs it, we can provide mapping instructions for how to use that file as well. Due to all this, they will notice improved financial controls. Obviously, checks can be lost or stolen. They'll see a reduction in the amount of time invoices stay open, since we are able to deliver that card information quicker than a check. And as I noted, they'll receive automated reminders to process any outstanding payments, and those will just remind them that they do have a payment waiting for them to process. And another benefit is that the vendor will maintain their status as a preferred vendor with you, as well as other buyers that want to use virtual payments. Surveys have cited 23% of vendors say that increased business does come to them due to payment acceptance of cards. As I just mentioned, the detailed remittance advice and faster payments are the most commonly realized benefits of card acceptance for suppliers, and these are the benefits that they most often mention in surveys. So here I'll show you an example of the remittance advice that's provided to your vendor through the virtual payments product. These advisories obviously are delivered via email. As you can see, the remittance is detailed with your vendor's information. It contains the last 10 digits of the MasterCard number, and those 10 digits will be new with every payment. And we leave the first 6 digits off, but they will remain the same for all vendors, and those first 6 digits are in the welcome email that we send to them when we enroll them in the program. And another thing that you'll notice here is a CTX file, and that's located at the bottom of each remittance. They can simply click on the hyperlink and use that file to help automatically close out invoices in their accounting system. If we are on a call and your vendor asks for more information about the program, this is the email that we'll send them. It cites many of the benefits that I just explained about the program, as well as some additional information and contact information to enroll. Now I want to get a little deeper into the different enrollment options that will be utilized during your call campaign. I know we briefly touched on these earlier, but we'll go a little more in depth here. So Pay for You is a free service that addresses vendors who aren't able to take payment via the standard email option. It may be that they won't keep the first 6 digits on file, or potentially they are not comfortable with receiving card information via email. But our Pay For You service allows us to pay these vendors by submitting payments on your behalf via an online portal, or most commonly over the phone. There are a number of industries where this type of payment method is most prevalent, telecom and utilities being the most common. I want to touch on what Pay For You is and what it's not. So it is for payments that the vendor can accept via email, and they may require additional information. These would be the vendors that you see on your weekly report in that requires more info status. We'll work with you early on in your campaign, and we'll identify as many of those as possible. So just be on the lookout for that, and if you return that information to us, we'll try to get those vendors enrolled. One thing to keep in mind here is that if you are paying multiple account numbers or branch locations under one vendor number, please let us know that so we can ensure proper payment application on your accounts. And what Pay For You is not is anything to worry about. So our Pay For You department currently has over 69 specialists that will manually submit payments to your vendors. The vendors do need to have over $5,000 in annual spend due to the manual effort. And also due to that manual effort, you will need to allow up to 5 business days for our Pay For You team to process your payment. Vendors who fit the Pay For You criteria that are not identified on the front end will be identified during the strategic call portion of your campaign. And if we do have all the information we need, we'll go ahead and enroll them. So if the vendor only needs the invoice number that you are providing us into the standard remittance to process payment, we will go ahead and enroll them in the Pay For You program. If we do need more information, then the vendor will be placed into a Pay For You opportunity or requires more info status. And again, you'll see a note along with those vendors that will let you know exactly what we need to continue with the enrollment. It would most likely be a copy of an invoice or an account number or a billing address, something to that effect. You would just send that information to vendorenrollment@comdata.com. And generally, we would only need that information one time, assuming you are consistently just paying one branch location or account number. We'll file that information, and you would not need to provide it to us again. In order to be proactive and help the strategic call team before your campaign begins, you can go ahead and start pulling together invoices for your utilities and telecom vendors and provide those to your project manager so they can forward it to vendor enrollment when your campaign begins. That will allow us to maximize enrollments on the front end of the campaign. And I'm going to touch on a couple of other possibilities here. If a vendor will accept payment at point of sale only, you may be able to use a ghost card, which is similar to a ghost card in that it's not printed on plastic, but it's different in that it's not preset in an amount and the expiration date is set much further in advance, so not at the end of the following month from issuance. You can keep that card information on file, and you can use that card whenever you place orders with a vendor that does only accept card at point of sale. Another possibility, if you have a more complex account set up or a vendor that only accepts card payments from a live link on the invoice, we may recommend an internal Pay For You setup. In this situation, we would set the virtual card to be emailed to someone internal at your company. They would receive the payments and then be able to process those via the live link that our Pay For You team would not have access to, or whatever the case is that someone at your company needs to be the one to apply that payment. That is certainly something that we're able to do. And these are both great options that can help you maximize spend for tricky vendors. Now we'll touch on one of the more unique benefits that Comdata offers, and that is Comdata Direct. And this is a proprietary closed-loop network. It targets your vendors that have declined enrollment in the virtual card program and that have an annual spend greater than $25,000. So there are two common reasons that vendors don't participate in the virtual card program, and Comdata Direct works to overcome both of those. So first off, and this is the most common reason not to accept virtual card, but your vendors may not process credit cards at all. So Comdata Direct is a straight-through payment processing option. It doesn't require merchant services, and settlements are transferred directly into the vendor's bank account. Second main reason for decline is that vendors are wary because their fees are too high and they may pass those along to you for paying via credit card. But with Comdata Direct, the interchange fees are about half of the standard MasterCard transaction, and we do control that interchange rate. Your strategic callers will utilize Comdata Direct during the strategic call portion of your vendor enrollment campaign, and our goal here is to provide your vendor with options. With Comdata Direct, just like with the merchant processor option, we're not trying to pressure them, only to help find an option that we consider a win-win for you and for your supplier. One of the best features about Comdata Direct is that there's no change in how you process these payments. You'll still send the same file as you do for a virtual card, and you'll still tag them in your system the same way you do for virtual card, but Comdata will catch those on our end based off the vendor number that they were enrolled under. When you issue a payment, rather than generate a 16-digit MasterCard number, we will generate a 16-digit Comdata Direct account number that's unique to the invoices that you're paying. We'll then send your vendor a detailed remittance file via email and deposit the funds directly into the bank account that the supplier chose. We'll then send you back a settlement file so you can update your accounting records accordingly. So not only does Comdata Direct allow your vendors another electronic payment option, but it will also give you many of the same benefits you see with our virtual card option, but with a reduced interchange rate compared to traditional credit card payments for the supplier. And here I'll show you an example of the remittance that your vendor will receive for Comdata Direct payments. You'll see that it's very similar and contains most of the same information as the virtual card emails, but there are a couple of differences. You can see that it notes that no action is required. The amount below has been settled into your bank account, and it gives the last 4 digits of the bank account number that the funds were deposited to. It'll break down the gross amount paid, which is the total of the invoices, and the net amount settled, which is the gross minus the settlement fees. And then on the bottom, you'll also notice that we include the same CTX file as the virtual card payments so that the vendor can open that up and automatically apply payments in their accounting software. So if we are on a call and your vendor asks for more information about Comdata Direct, this is the email that we will send them, and it highlights the benefits of the program and contains the agreement that they would need to sign and return to us to be signed up for Comdata Direct. So one of the big issues in vendor enrollment is vendors who don't accept credit card payments. Over half of the vendors who don't accept virtual payments decline because they don't accept credit cards at all. Most of the rest are concerned about the cost of acceptance. But so we partner with InfinTech, who I mentioned earlier, and this can allow us to reach these vendors by offering lower fees for card acceptance, and that's obviously not just for you, but for all of their customers across the board. And InfinTech specializes in business-to-business payments. They don't have any setup charges or long-term contracts. But so if a vendor expresses interest in that, we'll certainly connect them with InfinTech. And this would be the email that we do send them if they are interested. It'll give them contact information for InfinTech, and then we will also share the vendor's information with InfinTech so that they can get connected. We also partner with MasterCard to help assure that vendors are complying with the rules of acceptance that they agreed to when they signed up to accept MasterCard. A few of the main rules that we like to touch on, the first of which is honor all cards. So when they sign their agreement with MasterCard, vendors agree to honor all valid cards without discrimination. They can't say they'll accept for some customers, but not for you. This may happen if a vendor thinks that your payments are too high. Another rule that they agree to is no minimum or maximum transaction thresholds. So when they do sign their agreement with MasterCard, vendors agree that they will not require a minimum or maximum amount for processing. And another that we like to touch on is surcharging. So vendors are only allowed to surcharge in certain states, and there are several states where it's disallowed entirely by state law. If a vendor chooses to surcharge, they're supposed to register with MasterCard and provide written notification of their intent to surcharge at least 30 days in advance of beginning that practice. And they must disclose the surcharge at the point of interaction and must be presented separately within the transaction record. They're certainly not allowed to try to bill you for transaction fees after the transaction has occurred. We just want to make sure that you're aware of these rules and let you know that you do have the option to take steps if you receive a call or email from a vendor that you don't feel is in compliance with the MasterCard policy. As we do at Comdata, if you do receive a call from a vendor that appears to be out of compliance, here are some steps you can take. Ask them to send you their policy in writing, and please do forward that over to us. Vendor enrollment will send that information to MasterCard, and MasterCard will educate the vendor on the rules of acceptance or verify their compliance. One thing to note here is that you and Comdata are both anonymous in that process. We have had success with this process over the years. Most vendors do just need a little bit of education, and that education is provided by MasterCard and not Comdata. They'll educate them about those rules of acceptance, and as I said, we'll both be completely anonymous in that process. Along those same lines, if a vendor does object to a payment because it's higher than they normally see, let us know so that we can reach out to that vendor and try to offer a solution. If the vendor is limited in the amount that they can draft at one time, we can potentially open the card for multiple swipes, or we can have MasterCard work with their merchant processor to educate them. We may be able to offer Comdata Direct or find another solution that's acceptable for both sides. And we do also offer virtual card support services. So as I mentioned earlier, we'll call your vendor to remind or assist them in taking your payment if they have not processed it after 15 days. Now we'll touch on best practice. That's sending in new vendors. So we love to get new vendors, and we will commit to calling 100% of new vendors that you send to us after we've completed your campaign. When you do send in a new vendor list, you'll submit it on this new vendor template, and you'll send it over to the vendor enrollment email box, vendorenrollment@comdata.com. As long as we have all the required information, we'll get that list loaded into our portal. We'll assign it out to a strategic caller and begin campaigning and calling those vendors within the first week of you sending them to us. Another thing that we want to make you aware of and help keep your vendor list up to date and not go stale, and so we built this patent pending technology that helps make your e-payables program easier to sustain, and it takes out the manual effort associated with managing vendors and submitting new lists. And this is called Spend Escalator. It is a great new piece of technology, and we're very excited to share it with you. It's an expansion of our existing integration with your ERP or accounting software, and it automates the process of identifying new vendors and passing them over to Comdata for card enrollment. We will implement this program before your strategic call campaign ends, and this will allow us to continue campaigning to your new vendors that have come on since your campaign began. Your project manager will help you get all of this set up, and this will allow Comdata to make just-in-time enrollment calls to your vendors that you're actively paying, And this helps ensure that your spend volume doesn't decline just because you stopped doing business with the vendors we originally enrolled. Obviously, you're always out looking for better deals, new vendors to streamline your processes, and with Spend Escalator, we're able to keep up with this demand and create long-term rebate revenue and check payment reduction, which is obviously all of our goals. This technology will take the burden off of you and your AP teams to send us new vendor lists and automates that piece. So the manual process does require you to create an updated vendor file weekly or monthly, filter out the new vendors, populate them onto the template that I showed you earlier, and submit that list to Comdata, and then let us get it loaded and start calls. But with the Spend Escalator system, this is all automated. So reports are scheduled to come to Comdata weekly, and it'll recognize any new vendors or vendors that have upcoming payments. Our system will automatically filter out employees, banks, and things like that, and it'll automatically load that list to Comdata's portal, and we'll get those calls kicked off within 48 hours. This will allow you, like I said, about making just-in-time enrollment calls, it'll allow us to potentially make payments via virtual card for vendors that you would have otherwise sent a check to, and makes the whole process much more smooth, much quicker, and easier for everyone. Another thing that we've got in order to maximize your vendor enrollment campaign is a strategic campaign advisor. This strategic campaign advisor will work with you and your project manager to obtain the most enrollments possible. So they'll help segment your vendor list and identify the top spend vendors, and work with you to create an outreach strategy for each vendor. This will include current payment methods, points of contact, potential terms to negotiate, and things like that. And the strategic campaign advisor will then contact these top tier strategic vendors and be able to pivot from virtual card acceptance to our internal network, Comdata Direct, on the same phone call. This person will also participate in regular calls with you, maybe not every week, but certainly as progress is made or if there's specific data required to ensure that we get all the needed information for your campaign. Next, I'll quickly touch on a few of Comdata's offerings that you may not have been aware of. You're currently working with us to automate your AP departments, but we can also help with cross-border payments, corporate cards, T&E management, and payroll. If you do have any interest about any of these, please reach out to your sales representative and feel free to ask about these. And the last thing that I want to do is touch on a list of best practices. So we've touched on a few of these, but just want to highlight them again. You will want to make sure to dedicate a proactive administrator that will be involved in the whole process. This will be the person that communicates with your operations specialist and your strategic callers. They'll provide the data and answer questions about your vendors and everything like that. At the end of the day, more information equals more enrollments. This includes phone numbers, account numbers, payment terms, and payment types. These are all really great pieces of information that allows your strategic callers to provide you with a faster campaign and more enrollments. This is especially true for phone numbers. So if you did not previously retain phone numbers in your accounting software, start asking for this information from your vendors and keep it in your ERP so that any future list sent over to us will contain that information. Which brings us to another best practice. If you do not have Spend Escalator, send new vendors to Comdata for campaigning, whether it's weekly, monthly, or just as the vendors come on board. We sure don't want your vendor list to get stale, and we do highly recommend that you do integrate with the Spend Escalator, as it'll automate that whole process. Another thing we don't want to do is allow vendors to unenroll without an escalation process. As I mentioned earlier, we've got Infintech, Comdata Direct, and those are great options that we can offer. If you send the vendor our way, if they have objections, we can offer that to them and see if we can come up with a win-win. Another great thing is to incorporate virtual card language in your vendor contracts. Make all your vendors aware that virtual card is your preferred method of payment, and you may consider extending payment terms for vendors who want an alternative payment method. Potentially checks or ACH would go out to 60 days, while virtual cards could be paid at 30 days. Also, please make sure that everyone in your organization knows that Comdata is working on your behalf. Potentially have a lunch and learn. Maybe you reward by monthly spend, addition of new vendors, or hitting other goals and things like that. But certainly make sure that everyone's aware so that if any vendors do reach out to their point of contact at your company, that they are aware that Comdata is working for you. And last thing, please remember that we're here to help. If you have questions, give us a call. If you have any unenrollments and don't know how to respond, or if vendors have questions that you don't know the answer to, feel free to send them our way, and we would be happy to discuss options with them. And that concludes today's presentation. I would like to thank you all for taking the time to listen, and hope you have a great rest of your day.